From the Vegas Golden Knights, this is SLGND. I'm Justin Russo. After a hard-fought 6-game series with the Minnesota Wild, the Golden Knights are on to the second round of the Stanley Cup playoffs. Round 1 wasn't all smooth sailing for the VGK, as they trailed 2-1 to the Wild after 3 games. But thanks to 3 straight wins, including 2 in overtime, the Knights overcame their early adversity in the series to keep their playoff run alive. Now in round 2, they face an all-too-familiar foe, the Edmonton Oilers. These two teams meet for the second time in 3 postseasons with another trip to the Western Conference Final on the line. While the Knights aim to repeat the result of the 2023 matchup, the Oilers are looking to continue their march back to the Stanley Cup Final after coming 1 game short of winning it all last year. Lots of storylines to cling to for this highly anticipated second-round series, and to further break things down, we'll now send it to Dave, Shane, Dan, and Gary.
Golden Knights getting ready for the Stanley Cup playoffs round number 2. They'll take on the Edmonton Oilers, and that means another playoff edition of the Sheriff Lawless and Some Guy Named Dave podcast. All present and accounted for. A great matchup again. Golden Knights and Oilers. Great stuff. Rematch of the series a couple of years ago. Shane, why are the Golden Knights still playing hockey? How did they knock off Minnesota after falling down 2-1?
Well, they're the better team. And I think, recognizing they needed to play a certain way. And I wouldn't say they were bad, but I don't think they were at their best early on. And like we've seen with this group, they have the ability to elevate their game when it needs to happen. And, honestly, their top guys were a big part of that. They needed to elevate their game, and they did on those final 3. So I just think, and then when it came to it, a lot of the same words came out of our mouth calling those games that you did throughout the regular season, which I always say the points and everything gets washed away after the regular season. But how you got to that point, the keys that made you successful are what can carry over. And for the Golden Knights, find different ways to win. Find a way to win. Can be different. Depth came through. Experience came through. Some timely saves. Just all those little things that added up in the regular season came through. And, that got them through round 1. That said, there's another level they got to get to in round 2.
What did you see, Dan, from the radio booth?
Number 9 got better as the series went along. Jack Eichel, as much as this team has the players that can succeed, there's the star. And if he's not at his best, it just doesn't look quite the same. He drives whatever line that he's on. And I also liked how Bruce Cassidy adjusted things as the series went along. Just from game to game, you see what Minnesota has. You see what's not going well for your team. Okay, how do we get Jack going? Let's put William Karlsson up there and see what happens. And just some of those decisions. And, Bruce Cassidy's not putting things in stone, no pun intended. But when you have Stone, Eichel, and Karlsson together, that might work for a game or for a couple of games, but it's not necessarily going to be the plot for the entire postseason. So I think that, as Shane said, you have your best players, in particular McNabb and Theodore on the blue line, the way that they had that really struggle early in the series. And then by the end, they were, just controlling things on the blue line. So the star players got better, and then Bruce Cassidy pushing the right buttons at the right time.
Gary, what say you?
They don't like to make it easy.
They never do.
It isn't easy, though. Look
Not
at
supposed
the
to
first
be.
round.
For sure, but I just think that they, even in the games they won, they never won going away, really. There was never halfway through the third period where you were kind of like, okay, what can we talk about now? The game was the thing throughout that whole series. And I think Vegas is, you check off a lot of boxes against Edmonton, and Vegas gets the check mark in a bunch of those boxes. But if they make that, if they aren't committed to playing the right way right from the start against the Oilers, Edmonton could give them even more trouble than Minnesota did.
I thought the pressure points in that series, right? The penalty kill in the overtime in the 4th game. Then they find a way to win barbershop scores. Mm-hmm. Didn't take them long in the overtime in Game 5 for Howden to score. And then, the early goal, Game 6, Theodore scores, right? They were able to deal with, they lost back-to-back 5-2 games, right? Games 2 and 3. We mentioned the second game where, Shea Theodore and Braden McNabb had tough nights. But they were able to shake off. It didn't seem like it. Maybe it carried game 2 to 3, but it didn't really seem like it affected them too much. You know, they were able to handle it, and maybe that's the experience thing. I don't know.
Yeah, well, it's a good way to frame it, and it's something that I asked Jack Eichel about in advance of our pregame show for Game 1, and he said that he doesn't really believe in momentum, but he's a big believer in self-generated motivation. You know, it's not as though he's comparing himself directly to other stars. He's always been able to generate that for himself, and I think it goes hand in hand with, you know, not seeing too much, you know, getting taken over by the moment. You know, you're going to have your bad moments, and then how do you handle it, and then how do you respond? And I think that this group has shown. I think that there's, and Jack also said, you get some, having been there, some affirmation was the word that he used, having done it before, that you can, in fact, bounce back again.
How much do guys tap into that, Shane? And they got a lot of guys in that locker room that won it 2 years ago. They've got players that won it even before they got here, right? Barbashev and Pietrangelo.
Well, you'd like to say you can tap into it. I think it's experiences you can. It's not to say you're going to get the same result. That's the reality of it, and it's different. Everybody has different individual views on certain things, on the way it goes, and you do to an extent. Certainly, you want to be able to swing things as a team, but also individually, you have to have your only way mentally that you deal with certain situations and how you get by it and how you move on. So there's a lot of that, other than just watching the guys play the game. Yeah, they're as a professional athlete, you pick the sport, there's high pressure moments that you've got to handle it the right way or the wrong way, and move on quickly. I think that's the biggest thing, both in game and game to game, and then making the proper adjustments to be better.
Gary, you mentioned the Oilers. So they go into the first 2 games in L.A. They get smoked by an L.A. team that's the best home team in the league. They're down after 2 periods in Game 3 at home, and they're down a goal of, a minute left, whatever it was, in Game 4, and they win both games. So talk about, I mean, they had to, their road to round 2 was fraught with landmines along the way.
They got better as that series went on, for sure. They made a goaltending change, and Pickard won 4 in a row. You have to give him big-time credit for that. They're a little older than they were in 2023, and obviously, you know, Draisaitl now and McDavid, they lost to Vegas, went to Game 7 of the final last year. They know what it takes, or very close to what it takes. They're interesting to me because, you know, Evander Kane miraculously got better for the start of the playoffs, couldn't play in the regular season or be on the salary cap. Trent Frederick looks like he's going a little bit. They don't have Ekholm. It's confusing kind of what they are, and their depth got them through that series, because McDavid and Draisaitl, they didn't produce a ton in the last couple of games.
But they fueled the comebacks, right? After the challenge, right? You know, that McDavid kind of, if there was a turning point of the series, and
he was good that game,
right? And so that, if anything, he didn't have to carry them the whole way. He didn't. But in that moment when it looked like the Kings might go up 3-0, it was the star power that at least stem the tide. At least
that's the Oilers, right? So we were just talking about prior experiences. What do you learn from? What do you take? Yeah, this Oilers team has had some tough losses. They were down 3-0 to Florida. They made a series out of nothing,
right?
And I think that's the one thing you saw. Even the first game that LA won, like, they barely won. They were up, they had a lead, but the Oilers, I think they have a mindset that they're never out of it. So that makes them a tough out, because each and every game you've got to go. And I think Kelly McCrimmon talked about it today. You've got to play to that final buzzer. They feel they are in it, and I think that's a mindset that the Oilers have. And it's fueled when you have 2 of the best players in the world, obviously, that are that dynamic offensively. That gives you confidence, but as Gary mentioned, as we all saw, they don't get through that series without their depth coming up.
Well, ask the Winnipeg Jets and the St. Louis Blues about playing to the final buzzer. Bruce Cassidy used the phrase the other day, Dan, and I wanted respectful annoyance. And that was an answer to the playoff success of this team. Now this is in year 8, and he said around the rest of the league, I think it's a respectful. He goes, and I do get it. But they won 5 first rounds out of the first round 5 times in the 7 years they've made the playoffs. The only year they weren't was last year. So pretty impressive that last year in the asterisk year, 2019, the asterisk one.
Right.
We don't talk about that.
Yeah, the round.
One of those
game
game sevens that went to overtime.
I think they've won 10 series, right?
They've won 12.
They've won 12
out of
sorry.
17.
And how many has Tampa won? In
13.
That? 13. So they're closing in on that.
They'd have tied for the most series wins.
Yeah. So
it just doesn't just happen.
Yeah.
Look at all these other markets. It's so the fact that and look, they were able to last year, and a whole different scenario, right? With getting knocked out in the first round by Dallas, but a different story this year. And we would agree 2 years ago their toughest series was that round 2 against Edmonton, right? Mm-hmm. They almost swept Dallas. I know they had a couple overtime wins in the first 2, but and Florida wasn't that close, especially Game 5, but. Boy, it felt, once they got through that Edmonton series 2 years ago, it felt like they were at least, if not well on their way, certainly heading in that direction.
Yeah, it certainly did, and it very well could be again this year. Whether Vegas moves on or Edmonton moves on, I wonder if when we look back at the 2025 Stanley Cup playoffs, if we will end up pointing back to this series again between the Golden Knights and the Oilers. I just wonder how much is the same. And there's obviously some key components that are the same, but there are also some key differences between these teams from 2 years ago. And I wonder, how much does the depth become part of it for Edmonton? That's kind of a new thing that they have more of. The goaltending continues to be a question mark. The Golden Knights have lost some key pieces, but they've also added some key pieces. Do they rely on their depth in the same way that they did 2 years ago? We'll find out. Of course, this was also the series where the Knights had to change goaltenders in progress, right? Brossoit goes out.
That's
Hill
right.
comes in. There are a lot of little things, and Dave, you and I were talking earlier today. Some of those little stories over the course of a series, in the moment we were talking about them and engrossed in them, but then we kind of, just Colasar we were talking about this morning, right? Just like you forget about some of those little things, major penalty, all of that. Like it's fun to go back and kind of look through some
Didn't
of that
Petro get
history.
suspended for a game?
Their suspensions,
chopped
right?
Draisaitl
Yeah.
and,
and they're still
goodness.
complaining that it wasn't 2 games.
Well, if they haven't got over it, that's great. If that's still on their mind, that's
Well, the Oilers get a different coach.
yeah.
Right? Knobloch wasn't there a couple of years ago, and he seems as
They have a new GM.
New GM, and they did. We talked about this, I think, earlier this season, that they lost some key guys from that team.
Yeah.
I'm talking just last year, right?
year,
The
they
depth
did.
guys with McLeod and Cece and guys.
Fogel, Broberg,
Holloway.
McLeod.
That's 5 right there. Now, you can say they tried to kind of chip away at that at the deadline. They bring in Frederick, they bring in Wallman, they bring in Klingberg on the back end. You mentioned Evander Kane's now playing, so they're a deeper and better team now than they were before all those moves. But it's such a it can be such a fine line over the course of these flashpoints in games. And as we were saying, was that game tied? Game 5 when Colasar took the major for the hit from behind, right? Was the game tied? Or maybe, I can't remember. I remember thinking the Oilers might score 3 goals.
Yeah.
On that power play.
We had
They had
it.
no answer for the
Right,
power play
right.
earlier in the series.
Right.
Yeah.
No, and I'd have to go back and check that detail, and I will.
Yeah.
but
You guys let me know.
Right.
Shane's got it in his file cabinet.
Right,
in the house.
but that's another big thing that's different now for the Golden Knights compared to last year, compared to 2 years ago. Vegas's power play is
a threat.
incredible.
Yeah.
And the Oilers, while still good, percentage-wise is not what it had been. And the Golden Knights have come to generate momentum and it really changed the tides of games because of their power play success. That's not something we've ever been able to say in the previous 7 years, playoffs or regular season.
And you have to hope, and we'll see as we sit here now, Pavel Dorofeiev is day-to-day as we all are. But 35 goals during the regular season.
Yeah, they want that in the lineup.
13 more on the power play. They got through Game 6. Well, they get through the overtime, I guess, in Game 5, and then in Game 6 without him. But a massive piece of the puzzle
Well, he's
for
a big
young
piece,
guy, right?
But their power play doesn't really lack with. I know he had 13 power play goals, second to Hurdle, but Olofsson fits so well in that same spot.
He had 6 power play goals.
and a lot less time.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
That's a nice luxury to have. Certainly 5-on-5. Dorofiev's ability to drive to the net, make plays, so good on that line with Hurdle and Saad. But you know what? This is an opportunity that a guy like Olofsson wants to have and kind of step into that role, not only in the power play, but hopefully 5-on-5.
Will Calvin Pickard be the goalie for the entire series?
To start. If the Golden Knights are going to have success, he won't be.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Unless they're all nail biters and it's 2-1 or something like that. Yeah.
And
you're right.
We'll see about talk about Dorofeev. No Matthias Ekholm.
Yeah. It's a big part of the blue
massive
line.
part of it.
Did you see McDavid? Did you see McDavid's interview after they beat LA out? Gene Principe asked him about Calvin Pickard, and he did not mention Skinner once. He said, "We love playing for this guy. We love fighting for this guy." And I'm not sure it's the same with Skinner. It's
he's one of those. Yeah, Pickard's supposedly a tremendous guy, popular in the room, and works so hard. Yeah, that's
and won 4 in a row for them, and like, it's not a Picasso, but he gives them a chance to win, which is really all you want.
Go back to it 2 years ago.
Yeah, I was going to say, go back
to
the
first round. Aiden Hill didn't dress.
No,
did not dress. It was Jonathan Quick and LB, and then
Aiden is excited.
We know the rest of the story.
Aiden's excited.
He was this morning in the dressing room.
I hope so. They all should be excited.
No, they are.
We had Tomas Hertl on nighttime at noon. He's always excited.
Yeah,
but
never in a bad mood.
Fun must be always.
That's right.
But there was a lot. Aiden was just kind of like he wanted to talk about the games last night. He was talking about some things he noticed in Connor Hellebuck's game, and was like just really kind of engaged. And I just said, "You ready?" He goes, "Oh, I can't wait to play." Which is,
it's a good sign.
Want to hear that from your goalie?
What did he? Can you share what he had to offer on Connor Hellebuck's game?
He is hopeful for Connor that getting through that game will allow him to get back on his game. But he said there were some technical things. I won't bore you with that. But there were some technical things that he noticed that said he was not playing his game. He said Connor's game relies on a number of things. Those things were missing, and hopefully he can use like today. And when do they start? Friday?
Well, they're not seeing a Blues team. They're seeing a much better team.
Yeah,
right.
Wednesday at 6:30 Pacific.
It's going to be a lot more high-end shooting talent coming his way.
But he thought that he had some work to do.
We all do.
To get back to
a long line.
Get back to what he does well, and that'll be fascinating to see how that series unfolds, because it sounds like Heiskanen will play in Game 1 for the Stars. I don't think Robertson is ready yet, but their best defenseman is going to be back in that series.
I mean, can we ever recall Game 7s in consecutive days with that much drama? I mean, that was incredible.
It's incredible.
That
Absolutely
was
not.
just like your heart's pounding.
It's the best 2 weeks in sports.
That's great.
The opening round of the Stanley Cup playoffs, like all these people that want to change the format, sorry. Like, don't what we just had happen.
Keep proving
don't
it's
mess
successful.
with that. It's fantastic.
And usually, to your point, Gary, that the potential for upsets, if the Blues they're 2 seconds away from knocking out Winnipeg,
President's Cup team,
right?
President's Trophy.
Colorado's up 2-0 with 13 minutes left in the third period, and of all guys to come back and stick it to him, it's Rantanen.
Legendary.
You can't make this crap up.
Legendary, as Sean McDonough said.
Just
wild.
And as we go on, these series will all be good, but that first round is off the charts.
It is off the charts.
I mean, all the Western Conference series were 2-2, and like it just, and I asked Jack Eichel about it. This will be an invitation to tune into the pregame show on Tuesday, but he was gobsmacked with the level of hockey. And I was talking about the Western Conference, and he started talking about the Eastern Conference as well. And while you did have 3-1 series over there, still just the level to compete. There's so much admiration for these guys to see what the other guys are doing in the other series.
L.A., St. Louis, Colorado, and Minnesota are out in the West, and they're 4 really good teams.
What about Tampa in the East?
Tampa in the East. I don't think a lot of people thought Montreal would upset Washington. Fair enough, but to your point, Florida and Tampa, that Tampa team's been. Maybe they've taken a couple of steps back the last few years. I get that.
First round
for
exits,
so
3
long
years.
they were the cream of the crop in the Eastern Conference. It's crazy. Some of these teams. Shane and I we're doing something earlier today. We did nighttime at noon, and I was reminded of what Ken Holland told George McPhee a couple of years ago. We come into every season ready to go. Everyone's healthy. We think we get a great chance to make a long run, and there's only 4 teams that win 2 series every year. And that's just the reality of it.
Yeah.
Colorado, they make all these moves. Dallas loads up. Well, at least they got through to the second round, but they were 13 minutes away from St. Louis, took a 12-game winning streak just to get in the playoffs. I was texting with our radio friend Chris Gerber after the game the other night, last night, and he said, it's weird to say that the second wild card team, that it's a big disappointment that you lost in double overtime in Game 7, but it's a big disappointment that we lost in double overtime. And he said the 6-on-5s all year.
Yeah.
They've had huge problems with it. And Jimmy Montgomery didn't want to get into it. It's fine.
Yeah.
But not one, but two 6-on-5 goals. It's
I didn't like the way they played 6-on-5 at all. There was a couple of icings. And
Well, you got to take away the middle. That cross ice pass can't go through.
Yeah.
Buchnevich has the puck with 50 seconds left. He can skate it out. He can bank it
Why
out.
ice it?
Anything but try to split the uprights.
Right. Yeah.
And it's easy. I get it. And that's what we do. But even in real time, I was like, man. And on the overtime goal, and I'm not the analyst, Shane, but Sundqvist has the puck.
Yeah.
And he turned
St.
back.
Louis
like,
was not good in the
no.
overtimes, and they were not good down that last little bit.
Yeah. Well, from the Golden Knights standpoint. So if they're going to win, Shane, so let's just get back to the series at hand here. If they're going to win against Edmonton, what happens, and vice versa? If the Oilers pull through this, and
Well, I think the Golden Knights, and Gary touched on it, is about playing the right way, recognizing when you can make a play and when you can't. And I think they've got to go after the defense here of the Edmonton Oilers. I think Evan Bouchard, he generates offense both sides. So depending how you play him, it's true. He is dynamic offensively. Doesn't really the same effort doesn't go into defending. So that's fine. There's players like that around the league, but if
just
be
to
aware
your
of
point,
that.
14 giveaways in the first round, most of any player in the NHL.
So it's but they don't without Ekholm, they're not. I would say that's the weakness of the Oilers. Get in there. Calvin Pickard, get on him. Simplify. Don't look for tic-tac-toe. Pucks to the net, rebound, second, third. That's what happened with Minnie. They started getting to those goals. And, of course, you're going to try and, I'd like to say, shut down McDavid and Draisaitl. It's not going to happen. How about limit those guys as much as possible and discipline?
Yeah. I would say that Adin Hill was fine in the first round, got better as the series went along, and the Knights still won, even though Philip Gustafsson was outstanding for Minnesota. And had Minnesota won that series, even if Kaprizov was what he was, Gustafsson still might have been the number one star. So I wonder if Adin Hill is the better goalie in this series. With all respect to 33-year-old Calvin Pickard, at one point in the Golden Knights' history, he was the number 3 goalie, very briefly. Yeah. There's a reason why he has not been a regular NHL goalie, with the exception of 16-17 with Colorado. And I wonder if Adin Hill continues his progression and really does show the kind of form that we've seen so regularly from him, and if the Oilers can't sort out their goaltending. If it's Pickard who continues, if they go back to Skinner, Skinner has had his ups and downs. He could be hot. He can be, among the best goalies. He's still only 26, but obviously the first couple of games of this postseason were not good. Similar to how he started the regular season a couple of years ago.
Was Pickard the number 3 goalie before they ever played a game? Did he get traded before the season? I can't remember that.
It was,
far back.
So it was, and I'd have to see if I have the date in front of me.
He went to the Leafs, right?
Yeah, I went to Toronto.
Yeah.
Shane, you know that. What do you got in your file? No? Okay. I think they traded him to Toronto before the season started.
Yes.
That's what I'm saying. He was the number 3 goalie before they ever played any games.
And it was Fleury and Pickard, and then they claimed Malcolm Subban from Boston. The Bruins expected that he'd get down to the American League where he had been the year before. And for like a few days, the Golden Knights said, we'll carry 3 goalies, which we all knew was not really good.
Then it was Dansk and Legacy and Ferguson and everybody else. Gary, how do you size it up both ways here?
I just think blue line, coaching, depth, Vegas is better. And if they don't shoot themselves in the foot, if they commit, as Shane said, to playing the right way, I think they should win the series.
The only guy I would add is power play. If they can, and you look at it like in that
power play is operated at 40% in the first round.
Yeah, like whose power play is right. The Golden Knights, I don't have the number, like what they were at percentage-wise.
26.
But they scored them at big times, though. You know, they did score them at big times and, gave them a little, they got on the board first in game 4, I think, in game 6. Almost identical, right? Theodore scoring.
Yep.
So,
exactly right.
I would say, like, which team's power play. And I think you just go into it knowing that those two guys are going to do some damage. Hopefully it's not the damage that Kaprizov and Bolt, but they did, as that series
they
went on.
figured it out, right? They made the adjustments.
They
and
held
that's
them
what
at
you
bay
do.
a little bit more.
They did beat Kaprizov and Boldy, right?
Right.
They got to their I think Edmonton's depth is better than Minnesota's, but not by much.
That'll do it for us, and hopefully we'll have another one of these for round number 3.
That was the guys on Monday at City National Arena. Before we leave you today on SLGND, we listen into words from Golden Knights general manager Kelly McCrimmon, who spoke to the media on Monday ahead of round 2.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for making yourselves available. Wanted to just talk a little bit about round 1 of the Stanley Cup playoffs and discuss our next series against the Edmonton Oilers. I thought that the first round of the Stanley Cup playoffs were fantastic for the game, for fans. There's been a lot of great things happen in the National Hockey League this year with the Ovechkin chase for the record, the Four Nations. And I thought the first round had a couple of those moments as well. The games yesterday with Winnipeg, St. Louis, the day before, Dallas, Colorado. The first round in the West, I thought, showed the competitiveness of the conference when you had at one time all 4 series were tied 2-2. Really great playoff hockey. 16 days was the length of the first round, with the NHL adding a couple of days. The series is all had a 2-day break between games somewhere along the line, which was designed to have more hockey on more nights, and they were fortunate with 2 Game 7s that we had 16 straight days of hockey. So tough for people to get the grass mowed with that much hockey on TV. Our round 2, or I should just before we talk about round 2, touch on our round 1 opponent. I thought the Minnesota were very much what we anticipated that they would be. When you look at the 2 wild card teams, as we were coming down the stretch, we potentially could play St. Louis or Minnesota. Both teams, I think, showed in round 1 that they're every bit as good as the other 6 teams, just somewhere along the line. In Minnesota's case, it was injuries. In St. Louis's case, they had a little bit of a tougher stretch earlier in the year, but those were really good teams. And I tip my hat to Bill Guerin, John Hines, and the Minnesota Wild. I thought that they gave us a really tough series. I think that series, I always believe in playoffs, those series make you better when you end up in a series with a really good opponent. And I think Minnesota did that for us. We're excited about moving on to the second round. We know that we're playing a team we have some familiarity with from 2 years ago with our series in 2023. They've had some changes to their team. They've got a different coach. They've got a different manager. Some of their players have changed, and yet I think that both teams know each other pretty well. It'll be a good series. I expect that it's 2 really good teams. It should be really good hockey. So with that, I'd open up for any questions that people have.
Kelly, when you look at the first round and how Vegas progressively got better, is there and how Edmonton plays, is there any concern that to make sure that they get the Golden Knights get off on the right foot are sluggish, or are you actually pleased that the top line and everyone was getting better toward the end of the series?
Yeah, I think you pick up where you left off, and then you make adjustments as you go when the series begins. So, we did get better as the series went on. We won 3 straight games to win the series, and similarly with Edmonton, they won 4 straight games to win their series. So obviously they feel they're a better team coming out of round 1 than they were going in. I'd say the same about our own team.
Kelly, 2-part question. First, is there a positive to going through adversity early, being down 2-1 and finding ways to win? And the second part of that, does that help in a series where every other day is a game?
The playoffs are a great test, and everybody talks about them, and you watch them, you observe them, you have memories from other years. When you're in a playoff series, it's competitive. There's a lot on the line. The stakes are high. There's pressure on teams. There's pressure on players. And working your way through that makes you better, makes you more resilient, makes you adapt, makes you adjust, makes you improve if you're going to find a way to get through a series. Those are the things that you have to have happen. And I felt that we did that in round one, but we'll need to continue to do it. This is this is a better test. This is a team that's had great playoff success last year. Obviously, we know from the year prior to that how good their team was. So we expect a really competitive series against a good team. We'll need to continue to improve.
How important has William Karlsson been to setting your culture? He's been one of the guys that's been here since the beginning. You've brought a lot of other players in that have kind of had to learn the Vegas way. What has William's role in that been, and how important has it been?
Well, he's appreciated by the people in this room who see him every day, and by our fans, and certainly by the organization. But he is, consistent, zero maintenance, hardworking, intelligent, two-way player. Last year he was over 30 goals. This year he missed some time with injury, but proven playoff performer. Just tremendously valuable player in our organization, and as you mentioned, has been here since day one. Knows exactly what the organization is about, what we stand for, what we want to look like, and he's a big part of that. Has been from the beginning.
Other than their top two players, which is obvious, did something else jump out at you when you knew this was the matchup about how it will play out?
They're healthier than they've been in a long time, so I think that's has to be factored in. I think they would tell you that their depth was a big factor in the last series against Los Angeles. Los Angeles played a shorter bench than Edmonton did, and I think Edmonton felt they got really good performances out of the rank and file, so to speak. And obviously, their team is different than any team in the NHL because they've got those two players. And I know that anytime we've played them in the past, you just are never sure you've won that game until the buzzer goes at the end of the game, because that's how dangerous, how dynamic they are. I think you saw a good example of what they can do in game one of the Los Angeles series, a game that LA won, but Edmonton had a furious comeback to tie the game late before LA scored the eventual game winner. But that's what you're dealing with. But for them, as that series went along, and the question got asked earlier about the adjustments and the things that have to happen in a series, they got some really good contributions from other people in their lineup.
For more interviews and highlights, visit soundcloud.com/Vegas Golden Knights. And follow @VGK Radio Network on Twitter, as well as @VGK Radio on Instagram. For more podcast content, be on the lookout for VGK Today, which comes out every morning throughout the Golden Knights' journey in the 2025 Stanley Cup playoffs. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on SLGND.